You're watching the Green Room for the official launch of Regen Media. We're just going to be sharing on our social feeds. I'm reaching for my phone. And then we'll get started. If you're joining us live, you're in the Green Room. And if you're joining us live and you want to share it to your social feed, we invite you to do that. Bring on our social feeds. I'm reaching for my phone. Awesome. See, look, it works. Just gonna be sharing on our social. I love it. Awesome. So much. Oh, I'm just a dork. You're in the Green Room of Powerhouse Impact Media Group with Regen during their launch. And we're just sharing our Regen feed over. Mine's taking a moment to find it. How's yours doing, Shar? Facebook's done. Roll. LinkedIn is, there we go. See us. Look at us. It's harder on LinkedIn. Is that? Feed. Okay, live. Nothing like getting into the Green Room and like, hey, wait, where's my host? Oh, she's in her phone. Okay, I'm gonna leave the LinkedIn to you, okay? Yeah, I'm working it, but we're just gonna give it all right. Seconds. TTT, phone is off, not to be interrupted. I see we have a few people joining us already. Thank you for being here. We're just about to kick off the launch, the official launch of Regen Media. So if you're dropping in, we have you for about an hour or as long as you'll listen, and you can always come back and pick up where you left off. We're live to Facebook on the Powerhouse page and live to LinkedIn on the Powerhouse page. How you doing, Shar? Ready to roll? All right, let's go. Good morning. Good morning. I am Tina Overbury, or Tina O, and today is the official launch of Regen Media. I'm here with my sister, Charlene Sanjenko, as we celebrate the launch of her newest vision. I want to first acknowledge that we're on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Squamish Nation. We are live here on Facebook and on LinkedIn. If you have comments, please pop them into the chat, and we'll do our best to come on in and answer those questions. I want to let you know we also have another panelist who's just sorting out a little bit of mic stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to add Daphne March to our feed. Just a little housekeeping. We're here for about 40 minutes to an hour. We'll see how the conversation goes. It is a co-created, emergent conversation. So please feel free to add in your thoughts. We're here at 10 a.m. That's now. We have another panel at noon, which is with filmmaker. That's right. Changemakers. That's right. And then we have a 2 p.m. that features us, what we call the Braid of Powerhouse, talking about change making and asking you all the things that are in our head and heart about why regenerative media. And then we're back on at 4 p.m. for what I'm the most, most excited about, because I am. It's about the future of media from media makers that are under 50, because I'm 51 and I kind of want to hear what's going on in the 30-year-old brains or younger, right? Okay, so today this is all about taking media into our own hands, and this hour I am so thrilled to be here with fellow change makers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you just as I know you, and then I'm going to pass to you and have you introduce you in the way that how your heart speaks, and then we'll get into our questions. How's that sound? Yeah? Okay. I'm going to first pass to you, Charlene. I'll introduce you to Charlene Sanjenko, my dear friend, partner in change, and the founder of Regen Media. I'm just going to have you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Welcome. And it's a pleasure to host you this morning from our home here on the Sunshine Coast, the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish First Nations. I'm Charlene Sinjenko. I'm originally from the Splatsin band of the Shuswap Nation, and I am so interested to have this conversation with changemakers and the intersection of your work and the rippling power of media and how those two might come together creatively in an emerging form, and what you're noticing as changemakers over the last number of years and your relationship.
Yeah. Jar. Carrie, I'm going to start with you. So Carrie Isham is also a dear friend of mine. She lives on Vancouver Island. She's a child safety champion and the founder of Power Up Education. Carrie, how do you want to introduce yourself today?
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm a certified sexual health educator, and I live, work, and play on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Super excited to be here. I'm a mother, a wife, definitely pushing the envelope type of person. I've been like that my whole life. I am an orphan, I guess. Both my parents have passed away, but my mom and dad are both really present in my life, pushing me to do the things that I need to do to make the world safer for children.
Thanks, Carrie. Thank you. Over to you, Brenda. Brenda is a social justice activist and a financial therapist, and she's the founder of Rewire. Brenda St. Louis, how do you want to introduce yourself today?
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I feel so honored to be in the room with other change makers. And I work and play on the Coast Salish, Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam Nation, also known as Vancouver. I travel a lot. I go to many countries. I have a digital nomad kind of lifestyle. My partner and we kind of are working with trying to shift our narrative around money and wealth and finance and the potency of it all. I have been deepening my understanding of my heritage and my ancestry over the last 4 years. And I've been the kind of one of the first Canadians in a lot of ways. My father came here in 1617, his family, and my mom, her family arrived in 1563 from France, both of them. And we're a family of farmers, and they arrived in the now traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy, which is of First Nations, would include the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi, also known as Windsor, Essex County, and Detroit, the Straits of Detroit. So it's interesting for me to hold space in wealth, understanding money, and knowing the privilege that I came from to come here on this land. So I'm really excited to have this conversation and this story and explore it.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you. And now over to you, Dr. Shannon Waters is a medical health officer for Cowichan Valley Region at Island Health, Vancouver Island Health Authority. Shannon, how would you like to introduce yourself to us today?
Iasquail, good day. Entha Shannon Waters. I'm Shannon Waters, and I Quanasi Lamnala. It's really nice to see all of you. I'm sharing a few words from my traditional language, Halkami'tnam. I am calling in today from Halkami'tnam territory. I live and work and raise my family and do the work that I get to do within my home territory. I'm calling from the traditional village site of Teclupnuts, also known as Maple Bay. And it's really exciting to be here this morning. These types of conversations are what really keep my motivation going within these sometimes very chaotic and at the same time not very changing world of public health. So I was a family physician initially when I started off my career and work in medicine, and now I look after populations. And being in my home territory and being an Indigenous woman, also having on my father's side Swedish, Hungarian, and Scottish roots, I very much look at how we heal ourselves from two different world perspectives. And so in looking after the health of populations, I consider that to be not just human populations as the largely colonial structure that I work within does. I think about the animals, the plants, the water, the land, and really in terms of the number of urgent issues we find ourselves within coming out of COVID, the drug poisoning crisis, and what's happening with our environment as well. I just really see my work being helping to shift the narrative from, a certain way of viewing what our health system or what healing is, to that being very inclusive of the environment and the territory that is all around us.
Thank you, Shannon. If you're just joining us, you've just dropped into a conversation for Regen Media. It's the launch of Regen Media today. And Regen Media is an Indigenous-led impact media company that supports the creation and distribution of regenerative media projects that shift the narrative to lift society. And this is a conversation today with changemakers who are out there with their own passion, desire to shift the narrative. And so I'm going to open with that question. And we're just, feel free to have your mics off. And if we crosstalk, we'll just back up and have like a dinner table conversation like we would, like, pass me the peas, and we'll just keep going, okay? So our first question is, what narrative would you like to see changed?
Okay, well, I'll go. The narrative that I would like to see changed is many people still in 2022 believe that teaching children about their bodies from a young age strips them of their innocence. And the narrative I want to change is that the earlier we can teach them, the better. But there comes a responsibility with teaching, which is to educate ourselves first, to therefore and then be able to educate our children. And when I say our children, I mean the village, I mean the grandparents, I mean the elders, I mean the aunties and the uncles and the cousins and the next door neighbors and the football coach and everybody that has access to children. Because right now we have some significant challenges. Our kids are not safe right now. Due to COVID, more kids are spending more time online, and they're doing so without a lot of tools in their toolbox. And that really scares me. Parents are busy, but my advice is giving a child a device when they're 6 years old. You need to have the conversation about sexual images. You need to have the conversation about if somebody reaches out to you, what are you going to do? And so many parents are so busy and they're thinking that this isn't going to happen to their child, but I have evidence every day to suggest that it does.
So there's a narrative change around, is it around education? Like we need to be more educated? Is it a narrative change around feeling empowered to where would you go with that, Carrie? Like, tell me about more.
I think both, because when we are educated, we feel empowered. We can have conversations with ease, and it's some time that needs to be taken to be able to do this. As parents, we are our child's sexual health educator, whether someone wanted that role or not, but that is the role, one of the many roles that a parent takes on. And so it's really important for people to have people that they can have conversations with, difficult conversations with, and for kids to be able to have a variety of people that they can go to. I often say that children need a minimum of 5 adults, trusted adults. These are people that would believe them if they shared something really big and important, to be able to know that they're always going to be believed when they come forward, especially if it's to do with their private body parts. And so, feeling empowered because you have education that you can then pass from one generation to the next.
Okay, as a narrative change, I just wrote down, if as a child, if I knew in my head that I'm always going to be believed, like that's a narrative that I would love to have in children's. Yeah, I hear that. Thank you. Yeah. Shannon, Brenda, what do you got? What narrative do you want to see changed?
Well, it's interesting when I'm trying to find the connection that we all have, because we all are super passionate about wanting to contribute, add, expand, and create a different reality that we live in right now. And I love what you said, Carrie, about, you know, educating people about themselves first, right? Because we could teach a child something that we don't know anything about, and it sometimes doesn't penetrate the same way, it doesn't shift. So it's an inside job. And so as a financial therapist, one of my taglines is money is an inside job. So it's really about going to that deeper place of where, what unconscious patterns are we functioning from with money, and how even in the financial industry, so many people don't have a really healthy relationship with money. It's based on scarcity. It's based on overconsumption. It's based on not enough. It has all of those elements to it. And the narrative that I want to change is that we transform the relationships that we have with money so that it's a conduit for love and connection. And it requires us to do our own work and not posture that we know what we're talking about. And I think that there's a lot of facades that people put around money. And I really want to take it out of the closet. Let's look at it. Let's be present for it, and let's use it and steward it so that we can create a really powerful transformation on this planet, because I think it is an incredible tool that is so immersed in so much emotion that we haven't really actually unpacked it. And I see it time and time again with clients that, you know, people pretend. They pretend that they know. And the level of vulnerability that we need in order to move money in a very healthy way in the world it's surmountable. However, we're working on it.
So the narrative then, I wrote down so the narrative I hear in my head is money as a tool for transformation. But there's also something around this, like, I don't know if you're saying this, money as a conduit for love and connection. I'm not sure if you're quite going there.
Yeah.
Maybe. Is there something there? Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing. It's just that it's hard for people to understand that, the power of it, unless they've done their own journey around it. So it's the similar what you were saying, Carrie. It's like 5 people that a kid trusts. Those 5 people have to have informed themselves. They have to know what they're talking about in order to support someone. Yeah.
Cool. Just so you know, I'm passing to you after Shannon. Because it's Regen Media, right? We got to go back to media. Shannon, over to you. What narrative would you like to see changed?
Well, I'll just connect that to 2 things. One Carrie said, one Brenda said, that pull on the thread, I think, of what I'm pursuing in terms of changing the narrative. So, Carrie, just want to acknowledge you saying, you know, what responsibilities we have as parents to the children collectively throughout the village. And Brenda, also what you said about the relationship with money. I'm a mother with 2 girls, and I'm, you know, constantly thinking about my responsibilities to my children. And I'm someone who has had to do a lot of work around my relationship with money, because I kind of viewed it in a very negative way for a long time. And this responsibility and relationship really is part of something I speak to often in terms of the values that are behind a collective First Nations perspective on wellness that we've brought forward here in BC, which also includes wisdom and respect, responsibility and relationships. And, you know, really, I think the commonalities we in fact all have in, you know, the things we're searching for in the world, the things that bring us strength in the world, we have a lot more commonalities than we might think. But what the primary values around that can get blurred over time. Like a lot, I think you could say in terms of, and Brenda, really want to acknowledge with your sharing about who you are and where you come from, like money has been seen to be like a force of corruption or power in a negative light. but it doesn't need to be. And so how do we shift those narratives of what our collective values are in how we approach our work ultimately for, those who are coming after us? And so really the work I've been doing over the last number of years, particularly during the time of COVID when our worlds got much smaller, was really acknowledging, valuing, and upholding the fact that, the places we're in, the environment's inclusive of humans, plants, animals, water, like those relationships we have with those places are, in fact, our health system. And so if we can stop, so many things stopped over the last few years because we were trying to preserve our health system when we were working with COVID. Like really, that was like bricks and mortars, hospitals and staff and things we really, really need. But can we shift that narrative to be the health system being inclusive of the relationships we have with everything around us? And those relationships strengthen and bring health to us all.
Thank you for that, Shannon. I think that's it. First, did either of you want to respond to Shannon? And then I'm going to pass to Shar around the power of media, or to each other. I want to respond to each other.
Well, I completely agree with what Shannon said. I think we have very specific examples. During COVID, where did people go? People sought, refuge and support in the forest, at the beach, in community with the, animals and plants. And a lot of my friends learned about plant medicine and took time to do the things that we all really need to do. And I think coming back to what was said before, I really feel like it's shining the light on the areas that people really don't want to talk about. We can dismiss the planet. We can dismiss the fact that we have, unhealthy relationships with money. We can dismiss the fact that, kids are going to be okay if they're sexually abused. And clearly that's not true. So I absolutely uphold and when we look worldwide, we had, ecosystems restored in short amounts of time, and animals reproducing in places where they weren't reproducing for decades, right? So it was obvious that we are so out of balance, and the focus should be to put things back more in balance for the health of the people, the community, or society as a whole.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
What would you, so if you've just dropped in, we're in a co-created conversation and a launch day for Regen Media. Regen Media is an Indigenous-led impact media company that supports the creation and distribution of regenerative media projects that shift the narrative to live society. So I'm in a conversation this morning with Changemakers who are out there doing the good work of offering alternative ways of doing things or being in things, moving that change forward. And so I want to pass to you, Shar, around Regen Media and what's coming up for you in this conversation around your own change work.
Yeah, I think where I'll start, or just reflecting on 3 words that just sort of jumped out as you were speaking. And the first word is potency. Thank you, Brenda. I love the word potency. The second word is what we believe. And the third word is trust, by people we trust. So when I reflect that back on media, storytelling, filmmaking, what we see and consume on a daily basis, that basically influences what we believe is our reality. So when I reflect back on, children, myself, teenagers, and what I believed about my body as a young person, and how that was influenced by media. Need I say more? And then I carry on to what we see from media. And when I say media, I mean everything you're taking in a day. I don't just mean a newscast or a press. I mean everything you're consuming from a digital screen, from a story, from an ad, from an interview, from a book, from a podcast. What's been the overarching message of money? We need money to buy things. We need money to be happy. Like, that's the overarching message that I've certainly received. How many messages did I ever receive about the potency of money as a vessel for carrying love, connection, care to others? And then finally, with what Dr. Shannon was saying, like, to be able to reframe that we're at a tipping point right now where the health of humanity and the planet actually encompasses all of these beliefs. And what if we were to approach it from there, knowing that media is what we're influenced by more than 12 hours a day? How might we start to shift our perspectives as change makers, utilizing the power of what we see, what we consume? Because really, it is all about our health as humans, and the health of our families, our communities, and the planet.
Awesome. I'm going to bring up the next question. And I wanted to kind of couch it a little bit or give a little context. But the next question is, what was the catalyst that brought you to want to champion this change? And I actually want to circle around a conversation, Shannon, that you and I had a while back around the state of change can be so like, change, wait a minute, my life is so full of change already. I want to talk about change. I want to talk about resilience. I want to talk about restoration. And yet it's change that's the catalyst for those other words. And so while my question is, what was your catalyst for that change? I'd love us to see if we can get to not just the problem state, but where our answer or where our change work is leading us to, like the why of the catalyst connected to what's possible. It's okay to bring up a problem, but let's also make sure we're offering both sides if that comes up. Yeah. And so who's like, yeah, okay, Overbury, I'm ready. Get out of the way. Who wants? Okay,
Go, Brenda.
look at that.
No,
Okay,
you
we're
go,
gonna start with-
Shannon. You go, Shannon.
Okay, so yeah, Tina, your question activated in me a pretty strong memory. So it's quite a concrete thing, actually. I've been on a journey as a physician over a number of years, but a couple of years ago, I'd come back from a vacation with my daughters and I had pain in my abdomen. And I was so busy, too many things to do. I was ignoring the pain. And finally, in the middle of the night, I was like, I'm crying. Like, this isn't right. What's going on? So I went to our local hospital and had blood tests and things seemed to be okay. They set me up for an ultrasound in the morning. And I continued to cry throughout a lot of the night, went back, and it turned out that I had appendicitis. And I was going in for surgery later on that day. And so I had to stay in the hospital, like, you're staying here, Shannon. And there was nothing I could do but just kind of surrender to other physicians who were good people, who had trained well, to open up my body and do a surgery that very well could have killed me if it hadn't happened. And yet appendicitis is like a relatively simple thing. And I live in a country where, I have access to healthcare. I had people who could look after my daughters. And I was in this very inner journey. And then at the same time, the river that has sustained my families for generations upon generations, the Cowichan River, was so dry. We were in the middle of a drought that it actually had to start being pumped from Cowichan Lake to keep the river flowing. And that experience of myself going through surgery and seeing that the river was also needing unprecedented level of assistance just really connected me to what was going on physically in my own body, was very connected to what was going on around me. And that's when I realized, what I could do was to help share my view in that connectedness in being something that actually is a strength, because then we start caring. It's all one and the same. We're all connected. And really bringing that forward was what the next part of my work was going to look like. So yeah, that's a journey I'm currently on as well.
I love how it's micro macro, right? Like the earth is sharing with you the truth of what you know in your body too. And when you're paying attention, that happens all the time. And it's like, we think we're this small contributing being, but the ripple that we do when we're on our journey is so impactful that we often can't see it if we're not paying attention. And I love how you frame that. I feel similarly, like I did the work that I'm doing in the world kind of smacked me in the head and said, okay, this is what you're doing. And I was like, okay. I just kind of surrendered to it. And I didn't actually know what I was doing. I was like feeling around in the dark going, but I had this inner knowing that it was right, and so it was my guiding principle for everything I did. And I failed a ton. Like it was like throwing spaghetti against the wall and just see what sticks, right? And they go, okay, maybe half of that, or maybe half of that. And 13 years later, I finally feel like I have something to offer in a way. And I did a process where I did healing work for 126 of my ancestors. So like 7 generations of doing work with each individual one of them to have the whole of my people healed to the extent that I could, so I could gather that as my resource as well. Right. And it's like, I just feel like the work that we're doing in the world is not so 3D often. It has a broader impact if we're paying attention to it.
Carrie, how about you?
Well, in 2009, I decided to leave a full-time continuing job as a teacher and venture out to create my own sexual health consulting business. And I really had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a business background. And fast forward today, it's taken me a while to figure out sort of what specific things I want to be doing. But I guess the catapult for me is when I left my full-time job with a pension and 100 sick days. It was pretty set that I taught a group of grade 8s for an entire semester of sexual health education. And no one was ever away. No one was ever late. And what I really noted was, wow, these young people are really prepared for their transition to high school. Like I felt very confident. And then I said to myself, if you stay in this school, you can only help the kids in this school. And if you leave, it was so painful for me because much of my identity was a PE teacher and the girls group leader and the volleyball, basketball, rugby, whatever coach that I did for 13 years. And so I left and it was very painful because I didn't really know exactly who I was going to be. But I did know that I had a bigger calling. Fast forward today, now I prioritize specific groupings of people. I prioritize Indigenous communities as my top work that I do, working with foster parents, working with grandparents raising grandchildren, and working with kids who are in care. And it took me about a decade to be really clear that I wanted to work with the most marginalized, most at-risk groups, including people with ASD and FASD. And so I guess that's what sort of catapulted me into knowing like my true calling. And it's been a really painful journey. I'm not going to lie. There's been a lot of barriers put in my way of people in positions of trust and authority that really should have been able to help me, instead created barriers for me to access people who really needed it. And I think the work that I'm called to do is really in Indigenous communities, to listen and to learn and to support the integration of culture into the work that I do. So I'm always looking for, elders' input and community input, because I can't imagine, like in the area of child sexual abuse, in cultures where the child is the center of the community and the most sacred and important part of the community. We all know that the sexual abuse and many other challenges are happening. And I feel like right now is a great time where people are open, they're wanting change for the next 7 generations. And I want to be part of that, which makes me a little teary.
I just want to acknowledge the disruptiveness of change and the vulnerability of change and the hope that lives on the other side of that disruption, which I think is where the tears often come from, is that mashup of sorrow, helplessness, and hope.
Yeah.
In that same place. And the three of you and Daphne, just want to name that there was another panelist who just the technology wasn't working. But I don't want to forget her, Daphne's from Newfoundland, and her retreat center is Shamasha Retreat Center, and she's an Indigenous entrepreneur. And that thing that you said, Carrie, just around sometimes, like it just should have been easier. People in certain positions, like there shouldn't have been barricades or blocks there. And I think that speaks to kind of where we opened this with change. Like change is what it is. It can freak people out. And there's hope in there too. It's a double-sided equation. Shar, I want to pass to you around regenerative media and anything that's come up here that is kind of tugging on you.
Well, I think what I heard, like I always kind of like Shannon, kind of pull the thread through, right? So what I heard from the three of you that I wanted just to acknowledge and maybe mirror back was, change making is scary, right? It is the undefined path. I've read stats where, by 2030 or 2050, many of the occupations that we most need haven't even been thought of yet. So as we're pioneering forward, let's not be limited by the titles and occupations and roles of 20, 30, 50 years ago. Like that's where we're living right now. And I think it is really scary when you have to step forward and acknowledge a new identity, right? And so a lot of times I showcase the word media because people can kind of relate to that. Then I push it a bit by saying regenerative media. And then people are like, ooh, but then I push it further and go, you know what? I'm an Indigenous woman. I'm a modern day medicine woman. The planet needs healing. And I am here to learn, to heal, to share. And media is my medicine. The stories we tell, the oral stories that we hear, we share, we tell, form our experience of life. So I just really want to acknowledge each of you for pushing into what you don't know. We've all expressed, like, part of the time I didn't even know what I was doing. I can honestly relate, but you might not know it here, but you 110% know it in your heart, in your gut, and your ancestors are standing around you and behind you and beneath you, lifting you, just absolutely cheering you on and cheering us on, right?
Oh, thank you for that reminder. and to you too, Brenda. I'm really curious, let's take the panel outside, but the piece about the work that you did around healing the ancestral wounding prior to finding your own feet in your own center point. of your journey. Thank you for that. Okay, we're going to move into our third question, which it's funny how things just kind of find their way. We're already here. The third question I have for us, but I'm just going to reset the room for a sec, just remembering. If you've just popped into this conversation, there is 40 minutes prior to this, and you can come back and find your way here. This is a conversation with Changemakers. It's the official launch of Regen Media today. We have 4 panels today, 10 a.m., noon, 2, and 4 p.m. We're live on Facebook and live on LinkedIn. Regen Media is an Indigenous-led impact media company that supports the creation and distribution of regenerative media projects that shift the narrative to lift society. And the founder of Regen is my dear friend, Shannons Story here. And you can see Regen Impact Media on your screen on this little square. Make sure you check out the website and please join in the story of Regen. Visit the website and find out how you can support the next stage of after this launch. So we're going to move into our third question with our awesome change makers, which is, what do you believe or notice is our collective purpose right now? Shar is the founder of Powerhouse Impact Media, and now with the birth of Regen, everything that we do, she always says, and for the purpose of what? For the purpose of, for what purpose? For what purpose? And so there's, and on the leader path in Powerhouse, we talked about hands on the wheel and eyes on the horizon. And so there's a right now purpose, but then there's that big collective purpose. And I'm just going to pass to you. Let's open with Shannon, if you will. Like, what are you noticing or feel in your heart is our collective purpose right now?
Well, maybe I'll frame that collective purpose with the panel that's here today. And yeah, just really want to acknowledge, Brenda, you saying like the things that are out there that we maybe don't notice and really should be noticing. And that's been part of my journey over the last while is I went to many years, 13 years of post-secondary education, but really, like my ability to notice is just as important as anything that I had been trained for. And so collective purpose right now, in looking at our relationships and with the places we are in, I imagine, Carrie, that a lot of what you teach and speak with youth and children about is consent. And, our bodies asking permission, giving permission, and really in our interactions with our environment, we need to ask for consent as well. One of the things I've been working most with is the protection of water. How many actions do we take in water every day where we don't, ask for consent? If that was the way we lived our lives in the world, I think how we viewed, interactions with children would look different as well. And then, in that, how do we give back? And really in terms of, there's a lot of rebuilding, even economically, we have to do right now. After COVID, after, we had droughts and wildfires and floods last year in this province, how do we give back? And that means economically to, redistribute what we have as funds, money, resources amongst the community. How do we have people in those younger age groups? I love what you said, Shar, about like, what are the new jobs we don't even know about yet? How do we put the resources there so that we can gain from, the generations coming on their views, and like at the same time, as Carrie's saying, instill them with the protection, the guidance, the sacredness of those who have come before.
I love that. And can I just piggyback on that a bit? That when you first asked the question, Tina, I knew immediately that it was about connection. It's the connection with ourselves, our body, it's the connection with the earth, it's connection with our communities. It's the connection of what is the resistance to making a connection, right? Like, what is that place? And when you're talking about, consent with water, I mean, oh my God, that blew my mind. Like, it's so much about having almost like the extra um, spidey senses to go beyond what is in front of you and see more, right? And it's almost like cultivating the ability to see more is really what is the basic framework around connection for me. Because so often we look at people through our own lenses and we miss a ton of things because of our own bias. I mean, I'm at fault of that in the most drastic ways sometimes, and it's hurtful. And there's a lot of wounding that can happen around that. So I often say with Shar, when you said that, it was like when I was in university, I used to think, that it's the people that are in philosophy is what we're going to need in the future, because it's their ability to see all of the implications of certain points of view and what they create in the world. And I feel like a lot of the work I'm doing is like a big vision, but how do you get people to see it? And it's almost like I feel like I have to hold the big vision and then invite people into it. And sometimes I get trapped at doing the minutia, and then I forget the big vision, right? So it's like, how do you be expansive and connected at the same time? So I don't know how that sits in this field of our conversation, but it feels so related to that consent. It's like consent of energy, it's consent of knowing, it's consent of connection. And I don't know. Thank you for so much about that. I never thought about water and consent, but wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I guess for me, the last probably 5 years in particularly really educating myself on Indigenous values and, learning about reconciliation and what my part is. And so for me, I think we have the framework to do this through the calls to action. We're just not doing what we need to do exactly at the moment. And I guess for me, what comes to mind is to do no harm. So I'm thinking about not to harm yourself. And then if you're healing yourself, and then we're healthy interactions with our family. And then if our families are healthy, we're having healthy interactions with the community and then the society at large. And if we have the mindset that we will never harm, do our best not to harm nature, like you go camping, you take out everything, you bring in like small things like that, and, do no harm towards children, the physical, sexual neglect, so if we always focus on the relationships and the compassion and empathy that we have towards other people, then this will lead us in a direction of like mass healing. But it's going to have to replace greed and self-centeredness and, the focus on money and the patriarchy and misogyny and all of these other things that are going to have to be, and it's coming because we see such a huge resistance in the community, what is happening in the States with the abortion laws, and like all of that is tied in. It's like, you don't have autonomy over my own body. I have autonomy. And so that's like, do no harm. I guess the consent piece for me, Shannon, is always there. But like, we also white settlers stole land from Indigenous people. So like, we have to like go back and repair that, I think, to be able to move forward. And that's about teaching consent in our family, teaching consent in our schools, teaching consent in our community. Just generally how we show up in the world. There's going to have to be a big shift. And I feel that it's coming, but we are in the ugly part of it right now. I feel where this like, there's a lot of people who are scared, right? And they don't want this change because they've always been in a position of power and control, and they know they're losing that. And then things get really ugly for everybody else, while those few wealthy, generally, hopefully I'm not going to get in trouble, white, cisgender males who are just holding on for dear life. And I know for me, that it will be the women that are going to shift this in a better direction. I love my men, but they've had a long time to have power and control over the world. And I feel like it's our turn now. Sorry about that, if that was too offensive, but that's how I feel. So just share that.
I'm in.
Change makers, it's what we do. We speak what's on our heart, right? And I just want to come back to, I'm going to pass to you in a sec, Shar. So in the work that I do in the world as a story listener, coach, keeper, shepherd, I listen for, in co-created conversations, what's coming through. And if I may, I'll offer what I hear in this space, because I hear it as an invitation, as the five of us have gathered, where we've collectively gone to, is really the message for anyone watching. And I see this as a three-stepper. We got a three-stepper is what's come out between the five of us. There's a noticing that there is a deep yearning and desire for connection. That would be where we are collectively, is what I hear. And that the road and the rocky bits, like the obstructions, the barriers, the friction, what we're currently working through to understand is our part in this word called consent. And the surrender of that and the push of that, like all of the things around that pillar, that as a set, primarily as a country or as Turtle Island would self-identify, maybe not self-identify, but as a settler, like we have a settler mindset, and that's what the shift is. So we go back and make amends with that non-consent. So this road we're on is this road of consent. That's the change that I'm hearing that has come up from this conversation. And that the practice that we can then do to work through this consent piece is do no harm. That if that's all we had in our head, that was like, okay, how do I handle this? I do no harm. Okay, I'm on the right, at least my feet are on the right path. That's what I'm hearing here, so I just want to offer that. And I want to pass to you, Shar, around media. We're on our last 10 minutes, and I just want to come back to media, and then we'll do just a last word from all of us to close.
Wow, so much good stuff. How do I tie this back into media? I think, again, a few words popped up for me. One is around the worldview and the lens from which we see something. Again, what is affecting our worldview, right? And it depends what's on the other side of that worldview, what's on the other side of that lens. I think where the conversation takes me today when I'm having discussions about the power of regenerative media is this. There are a lot of challenges in the world today that have our attention. There's no shortage of challenges that have our attention. I'm going to call them distractions for a minute, because I believe as a change maker that the only role, you've heard me say this, the only job of our generation is to heal. If you're a leader, if you're a human being, if you have life in this generation, number one job to heal. To heal our relationships, to heal our relationships with Mother Earth and all things, to heal our relationships with money, with our bodies, with each other, to hold that, to do no harm. And so if that is our job, is to heal, then the power of media actually can start to repattern the roots of the problem. Because all of the distractions around us right now, we can look back in the last generation and actually look back at what got us to here. So could we not repattern the stories that we're seeing through a lens to be sure that these challenges aren't challenges of the future? So could we start to repattern what we're seeing and believing in our relationships to make sure that these current challenges never happen again. So who's getting upstream to do that, and how are they doing that? And that is, I believe, the role of regenerative media.
In this digital world we live in, all of us, we're all on screen doing something as change makers and as just individuals in our relationships. We're on social media. Yeah, it's a great invitation to remember what part are we currently living as in terms of regeneration? Like what part of the narrative, or how are we contributing to the current narrative out there? Yeah, thank you for that. So as we close, we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to reintroduce you just to remind people who's on this panel, who we're talking to. And we will go back and actually put all of your links up in whatever it is, the story up above, so that people can find you and find your work. If you've just popped into this conversation, we're just going to close it, but know that you can go back. There's 55 minutes of change-making conversation here around the power of regenerative media. This is the launch day of Regen Media, founded by my sister, Shannons Story. Regen Media is an Indigenous-led impact media company that supports the creation and distribution of regenerative media projects that shift the narrative to lift society. We're here with Carrie Isham, child safety champion and the founder of Power Up Education. We're here with Brenda St. Louis, social justice activist and financial therapist and the founder of Rewire, and Dr. Shannon Waters, medical health officer for Cowichan Valley Region at Island Health, Vancouver Island Health Authority. And not with us, but with us is Daphne March, Indigenous entrepreneur in Newfoundland and the founder of Shamash Retreat Center. And I'm Tina Overbury, part of the leadership team of Powerhouse. And this is my pal, Charlene Sanjanko. So let's close our conversation. And I know I didn't prep you for this, so I don't know, just pop into my head though. So you can riff on it, okay? Don't feel like you gotta get it right, just mess around with it. A question I always ask people when I'm working with them in a core story kind of way, which is if you could spray paint the sky, with that thing you just wish everybody got, which is on this conversation of changing the narrative. What would you spray paint the sky with? And you don't worry about getting it right because I didn't prep you. But like if I had to spray paint the sky, I would say you as a living story matter, and your narrative is part of our collective narrative. It's a long spray paint. And so live the narrative you are designed to be. Live the narrative you're designed as. That's where I'd go. Who wants to go first, just to wrap up your time here?
I'll go. Mine is short. I feel a very strong pull to spray paint the sky saying return to the village. I just feel like, yeah, that would solve a lot of the challenges that we're seeing today if we cared deeply for one another, cared for the planet. Yeah, return to the village.
I would spray paint the sky. We are all connected, and you're far more powerful than you give yourself credit.
And I would spray paint, the ecosystem is our health system, and remember, you are part of the ecosystem.
What are you, Shar?
Wow. My go-to is always to remember that life is such a gift. And just how might we experience the fullest expression of what we're here for and who we are here for in this moment, and then this moment, and then this moment.
And thank you for joining us, all the listeners, viewers, sharers, and please do share this. You are part of the narrative. You are part of the narrative we are all living into. Please feel free to make comments, as anytime you watch this comment, someone will reach out to you. If you have something, you're like, I need this, I want to support Regen, we will connect with you. Again, Regen is an Indigenous-led impact media company that supports the creation and distribution of regenerative media projects that shift the narrative to live society. Please join us and the story of Regen. Visit regenimpactmedia.com so you can learn how you can be part of the next stage of our growth. And thank you to you, Shar, for your vision and all that you're bringing forth, and to the panelists for your conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Hey, Awed. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.